In America's Gilded Age, fortunes could transform wilderness into wonderlands. But among all the mansions built by industrial titans, one stands apart, not just for its opulence, but for the battle waged to save it. Like a marble mirage rising from Florida's untamed coastline, this palace became the crown jewel of America's southernmost frontier, where 7 types of marble shimmered beneath electric lights, still considered magical in 1902. Its creator rose from grain dust and wagon wheels to become one of history's wealthiest men, wielding enough power to redraw the map of Florida itself. He built his personal paradise on the shores of Lake Worth, commanding armies of artisans to craft 75 rooms of unmatched splendor. But the true drama of this great house lay not in its creation, but in its salvation decades later, when wrecking balls loomed and bulldozers circled. In today's episode of Old Money Mansions, we share the story of how one of America's greatest mansions nearly vanished, and how an extraordinary alliance of preservationists and dreamers fought to ensure it would stand for centuries to come. The man who would come to build Whitehall, Henry Morrison Flagler, grew up amid the hum of clanking wagon wheels and the smell of grain dust in small-town Ohio. Born in 1830, he left home at 14, carrying little more than his clothes. His uncle's store in Republic offered a modest salary and a crash course in basic commerce. By 19, he was earning $400 a year, sizable compensation for a young store clerk in that period. He showed a knack for connecting with people, whether they were regular townsfolk buying a yard of cloth or traveling salesmen hawking new goods. Everyone noticed that he didn't just want to earn a wage, he craved a broader horizon. Those restless ambitions guided him into the liquor and grain wholesale trade. His deals turned increasingly profitable, and by the outbreak of the Civil War, he had accumulated about $50,000, no small feat for a man in his early 30s. Yet despite that early fortune, he felt an unspoken itch, a hunch that a bigger opportunity was waiting somewhere else. Fate nudged him toward that next chapter when he connected with John D. Rockefeller and Samuel Andrews in the late 1860s. Through the investment of Flagler's stepbrother Stephen Harkness, the partnership of Rockefeller, Andrews and Flagler was forged. They refined crude oil and negotiated shipping rebates that slashed costs. Their venture evolved into the mighty Standard Oil, which would dominate American petroleum refining. Although Rockefeller became the public face, those on the inside credited Flagler's strategies. He was the one who meticulously built alliances with railroads, executed key acquisitions, and dreamed up expansions that overtook rivals. By the 1880s, his mind began to wander from the day-to-day rigors of oil refineries. He found himself in Florida, initially hoping to improve his wife's health in a gentler climate. The scenery stirred him. Under the palm fronds and sunlit skies, he saw a place that could attract thousands, if only it had better rail connections and upscale lodging. Fueled by a drive to create, he poured money into rail lines and built massive hotels in St. Augustine. Florida's eastern coast, once a patchwork of small fishing villages and wild scrub, was on the verge of reinvention. Still, he yearned for a personal haven. He had glimpsed bits of architectural grandeur elsewhere, and something told him that Palm Beach could host a mansion worthy of the Gilded Age's glory. With the same energy he'd invested in Standard Oil, he turned to real estate. He wanted a vast, opulent home with columns of marble, ceilings that soared, and modern amenities that would outshine anything Florida had yet witnessed. Another transformation in his life arrived around this time. He entered into a new marriage at age 72. This leap of faith carried him from old routines into a realm of renewed possibility. And a plan began to form that would put Palm Beach in the spotlight. He had no idea that an architect's blueprint would soon provoke wonder, provoke envy, and eventually provoke a fierce battle for survival. That leap into matrimony happened in 1901, causing many a raised eyebrow. Henry was 72 and Mary Lily Keenan was 34. Conversations in drawing rooms across the country focused on their pronounced age gap and on how Henry's second marriage had ended. He brushed off the chatter, gifting Mary Lily an enormous check plus millions in bonds, then turning to an architectural firm for something more grand than any Florida residence had ever attempted. He decided to collaborate with John Carrere and Thomas Hastings, who had already designed an imposing hotel for him in St. Augustine. Their challenge was to top everything they had done before. He had purchased a stretch of land on the eastern shore of Lake Worth back in 1893, spending $50,000 in anticipation of this moment. By July 1900, surveys were being conducted and plans were drawn. The mansion would wrap around a courtyard to harness breezes from the water. The facade would display marble columns and arches, and every corner would exude grandeur. Construction started in the summer, with workers racing deadlines and hauling in tons of building material. Locals paused to watch the daily convoys, certain that something astonishing would soon appear. Less than 2 years later, the result soared to life. Whitehall, an expanse of 100,000 square feet, comprising 75 rooms, all crowned with a distinctive red barrel-tiled roof. The interior glowed under electric light, an innovation that many still considered a novelty in private homes. 7 varieties of marble shimmered along floors and walls. The grand hall at the entrance occupied 5,000 square feet, and rumor said there was no larger entry foyer in any private residence of the era. Newspaper headlines declared it a pinnacle of Gilded Age extravagance. Visitors marveled at the illusions of endless corridors, each more detailed than the last, reflecting in polished marble surfaces. It was as though Flagler wished to leave no doubt. Florida's potential had reached a new magnitude, crowned by this mansion on the water. Mary Lily, who shared her husband's vision, brought in furnishings that included French tapestries, gilded mirrors, and carved antiques. Leading interior designers from New York shaped rooms in styles ranging from Italian Renaissance to French Regency. Despite its monumental aura, Whitehall was intended for personal use every winter, an escape from northern snow for Flagler's circle of friends, business associates, and favored guests. Servants bustled in spacious hallways, ensuring dinner parties proceeded with precision. Rumor spread that Flagler's zeal for perfection extended to every detail, including the temperature of table wines and the polish on silver candelabras. It was the kind of place that seemed untouchable. That impression of permanence didn't last. An accident on a staircase would soon change how these halls were occupied. In the spring of 1913, Flagler was found at the bottom of a marble staircase, gravely hurt from a fall. He passed away soon after, ending the career of a man responsible for transforming entire stretches of Florida. Whitehall fell into a hush, as if mourning its creator. Mary Lily inherited the property, but a profound sadness settled around her. She seldom visited, and by 1917, her own life came to an unexpected close. She left Whitehall to her niece, Louise Clisby Wise Lewis, whose priorities followed a different path. Stories circulated that Louise felt no strong attachment to Palm Beach. When an investor group approached her with a proposal, she sold them the mansion. In the mid-1920s, Florida's tourist industry soared, fueled by real estate speculation and a national fascination with tropical climates. This group believed Whitehall could become a money-making hotel. It was a logical plan in the midst of the property boom. They erected an 11-story tower against the mansion's western facade, affixing 250 guest rooms and overshadowing parts of the original layout. Some of Henry's favorite spaces vanished beneath renovations. His personal office was dismantled and the private staff quarters were converted. Lounges, ballrooms, and concierge stations replaced intimate salons meant for close friends. Such a mighty home, once devoted to private evenings and quiet walks by the lake, found itself overrun by suitcases, bellhops, and seasonal visitors searching for lavish getaways in the Florida sun. For a time, the hotel succeeded. guests admired the blend of old-world decoration and new accommodations stacked in the tower. They saw the shimmering marble, read about Henry Flagler's storied legacy, and lounged in once private rooms turned social spaces. That spirit of transformation, however, slowed when competition surged in Florida's hospitality sector. The boom years took a downturn, and by the late 1950s, the hotel stumbled into financial trouble. Whispers began to circulate. The entire structure might be demolished in favor of something new and profitable. In a city priding itself on modern architecture and evolving tastes, the concept of a wrecking crew tearing down Whitehall seemed possible. Local historians shook their heads. Descendants of old families worried about what might vanish if bulldozers arrived. The building had become a living relic of a bygone era, and a relic with mounting maintenance costs. The machinery of progress often moves forward without sentiment. Still, a final stand was forming that could decide whether Whitehall's walls would endure or disappear. By 1959, demolition rumors sharpened into plausible plans. Developers had an eye on the prime location, and the building's precarious finances fueled the speculation. Jean Flagler Matthews, Henry Flagler's granddaughter, discovered the extent of these threats. She realized that if no one took immediate action, the once splendid mansion might be reduced to rubble, and the legacy of her grandfather's pioneering vision would fade into memory. She stepped in, assembling a non-profit entity called the Henry Morrison Flagler Museum. This group pooled resources and persuaded key parties to sell them the building. The transaction was finalized, just in time to halt the dangerous drift toward demolition. By February 1960, Whitehall reopened as a public museum. On the anniversary of Henry and Mary Lily's arrival, guests arrived in formal attire for a restoration ball that symbolized an uncommon triumph for historic preservation in a region often enthralled by the latest real estate ventures. Restoration efforts took shape over several years. The most dramatic change involved removing the top 10 floors of the modern tower, freeing Whitehall's original silhouette in 1963. Volunteers and experts worked to reclaim old rooms from beneath decades of hotel refits. They tracked down period furnishings, chased leads on art pieces believed to have been part of Henry's collection, and examined structural elements that had worn down in Florida's humid climate. Among the most prized discoveries was Flagler's private railcar number 91, which found its way back to the property. It helped visitors see another facet of the story. The Grand House was only one expression of a man who tied Florida's coastal towns together with tracks and trains, forging a corridor of development from St. Augustine to further south. Although the museum project looked successful, a complex undertaking still lay ahead. Whitehall's delicate ornamentation demanded painstaking upkeep, funding was never guaranteed, and not everyone valued preserving relics of wealthy industrialists. But the group remained determined to anchor this piece of the past in the community's memory. They were racing against time once again, because a museum that didn't captivate modern audiences risked losing relevance. Despite the challenges, Whitehall found a renewed mission as a cultural institution that drew curious travelers from around the globe. The first 2 floors were open to the public, revealing an opulent haven from 1902. Marble columns stood tall, reflecting sunbeams through stained glass windows, and the vast hall soared overhead with its original majesty. The old tower's lower levels became exhibition halls, where staff organized rotating displays on Gilded Age design, Florida's development, and the family's impact on trade, hospitality, and transportation. In time, the museum earned national recognition. The building became a National Historic Landmark and received accreditation from the American Alliance of Museums. Attendance soared to nearly 100,000 a year. School field trips introduced younger generations to the extraordinary feats and contradictions of that era. Visitors traced their fingers along the gleaming surfaces of 7 types of marble, imagining how Flagler's parties must have looked beneath the glow of early electric bulbs. Lectures, concerts, and seasonal events filled spaces once intended for private gatherings, now humming with civic life. The museum continued to invest in detailed restorations, from period wallpaper to the wooden details in the music room. Preservation required constant diligence, especially in the face of coastal humidity. Experts monitored temperature controls, battled mild corrosion of metals, and balanced the urge to modernize with the promise of historical authenticity. Meanwhile, the story of Henry Flagler became intertwined with the identity of Palm Beach. People admired how one mansion's rescue effort had fueled local pride and shaped public dialogue on heritage. This living monument invited a reflection that stretched beyond its marble walls. It exemplified an era when an individual's vision could reshape a coastline, advance rail lines, and spawn entire industries. It also stood for the fragile nature of legacy, revealing how fortunes and reputations hinge on timely decisions. Stepping over the threshold into Whitehall, visitors felt the echoes of a distant time when dinner guests strolled among candelabras and turned rooms into glittering stages for conversation. Today, the building's survival sends a message about balancing innovation with reflection on earlier achievements. It reminds onlookers that, with determination, a community can preserve places once threatened by the wrecking ball. And every day, new people arrive to pass through these grand corridors, eyes brimming with awe, ready to engage with the past in a place that nearly vanished. Those footsteps will continue, just as curiosity about Florida's Gilded Age continues to stir, because each visit offers something surprising in a building that has already lived several lives and stands ready to share them all. And now, we'd love to see you in the comments. Are you a native of Florida? And have you visited this building before? We can't wait to hear from you, and thanks for joining us for another episode of Old Money Mansions. Cheers, until next time.